day here in New York City. My name is Stuart Ginsburg. I am two things, both a host and a performer. We're going to have amazing stories tonight of people who have great stories. It's a storytelling show. Some funny, some sad, some not funny, some sad. Again, I said that again. All right, so I am going to go first, and I'm going to walk away and come back in character. Excuse me. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I wasn't here 5 minutes ago, but appreciate it. So the theme of the show is new beginnings, and so I want to let you know that when I was in middle school, even though I'm a nice guy now, I've always been nice and really kind and all that stuff, but I think I was like a lot of middle schoolers when you try to push the envelope a little bit. And so I remember one time I was alone in the house, and back then, I think I see people around my age or older, but back then, you used to be alone in the home, and no one really cared what you did. And so I remember that my father had some gold spray paint, and I decided to take it was in the basement, and I decided to take that gold spray paint, and he had a really nice workbench and work area in the basement. God. You can know where I'm going with this, I guess. So I decided to take that spray paint and spray all over the workbench area and on cinder block. Part of it was cinder block. I thought I was being nice because the cinder block was gray. It needed some touching up, And then that night, my mother and father, did you do that? What did you do? Now back then, you really could get punished. You could get hit too, right? I mean, not that they hit me. My parents are going to see it. My mother's going to see this tape. She never hit me. Okay. So I basically, so I didn't do it. And my mother said, yeah, you did. I said, no, I didn't. Maybe it was my brother Jeff, who was my older brother. And she said, Stuart, you wrote your name on the wall. Yes, true story. And I said, well, maybe someone else named Stuart wrote it. Like, I was dumb. I was a dumb 11-year-old. Then another time, it was around the same time, it was 4th of July, and you get those sparklers and you like them and all that. And I had some left over. And yes, I was alone again. I was bored. And guess what I did? I lit those sparklers up, and I went around all the different rooms, smelled up all the rooms, and then I'm like, yeah, thank you. And then I thought to myself, I got to dispose of these metal rods. Should I throw them out in the trash like a normal person? No, I'm going to put them in the toilet and flush them down the toilet. So I was 11, okay? I wasn't, So again, the same thing. They didn't get flushed down. I got in trouble and all that. So this is a big longer story next, is that in middle school, we had a 6th grade teacher named Miss Lucas. And Miss Lucas had no sense of humor. And she looked like Richard Nixon, so just you can imagine that room jutting out, hey class, this is what we're going to do, that type of thing. So what we did is we're standing in a hallway, maybe in between classes, two other friends, and the window is open, and Miss Lucas is walking by the parking lot, and somebody yelled, hey, Miss Lucas, and we all kind of laughed or whatever. They were stupid. So I'm standing there like this, talking to my friend, and she comes up and goes, all right, who did that? Who called me stupid? And we're like, what are you talking about? And I said, I didn't call you stupid. I said hello to you in a very mocking, loud way. I really did, and laughed at her. But then we get to the vice principal's office, and the vice principal was at a central casting, a guy named Mr. Ginter. I didn't even know his first name. And this is the late 70s. He had that 3-piece suit with the jacket. He always wore that little timepiece and tie like up to here. And he get called in the office. I'm standing there, not sitting. We're 11 years old. I keep saying that. What kind of person does that to you? He doesn't like to sit in front of him. We're standing. His little card file, and he says, "Okay, did you call Miss Lucas stupid? No. Did you yell out the window, hey, stupid? No." So what he does next is very manipulative. He says, you know what I like? I like a man with guts. I like a man who could step up to the plate and admit that he was wrong. I really like a man with guts. Do you have the guts to look me in the eye and tell me you call Miss Lucas stupid? And he says to me, Mr. Ginsburg, did you call her stupid? Now, again, we're very young. He's calling me Mr. And I just looking back on that, I think he was probably the type of guy when you met him, he would call you chief or stud or something like that. Or he's the type of guy that would put the number 69 in the back of his fraternity jersey because he was so smart and cool, and no one ever thought of that ever before. Only he did. Anyway, so thank you for so anyway, we no, he said no, right? And so I got detention anyway, because who believed, back then, no one believed you if you'd said no. But actually, I told a little white lie. I did yell out the window. I didn't say, hey, stupid, or stupid Lucas. She changed her story. She changed her story too many times and said that. But the moral of the story, I don't know if there's a moral, it's just that I stopped yelling out windows at people. And I think, I got caught again. I was sitting there, and in a way, I spray painted Miss Lucas and got caught. Thank you. All right, let's hear it from me. All right. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So next up, we are going to hear from, and I don't want to mistake, all the way from New York City, David Alfaro Serrano. Give it up.
Well, hi. A few months ago, my friend Carol and I met in the coffee shop we usually meet, but this time, it was different. She was ecstatic. Like, oh, David, you can't believe it. It's amazing. It's life-changing. What happened, Carol? What is it? Turns out that without telling anyone, Carol had gone the previous week to a psilocybin retreat. Psilocybin is the drug in the magic mushrooms. So there are these events where people go and, I don't know, do psilocybin and explore their minds or whatever. And she had gone, and she was like crazy about it. Oh, it's life-changing. I have seen things with so much clarity. I have a peace that I haven't felt before. You should definitely do it. Whoa, God, wait. I'm a cool guy, but I've done weed a couple of times in my life, and that's it, right? I'm not the type of guy who's gonna go to somewhere to do drugs with a bunch of strangers. Also, like, this is illegal, right? Like, if something goes wrong, nobody's gonna call for help. And also, like, who are these people? Is this like a cult or what's going on here? That's dangerous. I'm definitely out of it. But curiosity is a powerful force. So a few weeks after that, on a Saturday, on a sunny day, I was on a cab going to a warehouse in Brooklyn to a psilocybin retreat. So the cab was going very fast. Damn it, Carol! I don't want to join a cult today. Why am I doing this? We arrived to this warehouse, and another cab was arriving at the same time. This other person and I, we were both carrying these big blankets that we have asked to bring, and a pillow. I rang the bell, and a person showed up. She had like very long hair, a very peaceful face, and this long white linen shirt. I was like, okay. So she welcomed us and let us in. Inside this place, there was like a big space, like an auditorium, with no windows. And all around, there were candles and these little yellow dim lights. And everyone was sitting like in a circle. And in the middle of this circle, there was the only bright object in this place. A white, bright lamp in the form of a mushroom. Okay, well, I'm already here, so what can I do? So I just took my blanket, put it in the floor, and sat with them, looking at this beautiful mushroom. Clearly, some people in the room had done this experience before, but others were newbies. So I asked the person on my left, hey, have you done this before? But she also was unexperienced, so she couldn't give me any pointers. There were around like 6 people guiding the experience, and they started walking around us, giving little boxes with pills inside. I was like, okay, this is it, this is real. And one of them started talking, and he told us that they were there to support us and to help us if something happened, but this would be first and foremost, an individual journey in which we will need to, quote, let go. Okay? And after saying that, he very solemnly said, now it's the time. Take the pills. And I looked around, and everyone was opening their little boxes and started taking their pills. And I said, oh my God, what? Like, this psilocybin retreat looks a lot like I don't know, like a mass suicide, like, right? Like, the police is here, take the pills. Like, what? But you know, I was already there, so I opened my little box and I started taking my pills, like one after the other, with war in between, because I don't want to choke before the aliens come to pick us up or something. Taking the pills, and then we started doing some breath work. And then when we blindfold ourselves and continue. And we lay in our blankets and continue. I've been here before. And I have heard this conversation before. And it hurts again. And it ashames me again. But this time, something is different. This time, I see it in a different way. This time, I understand that I don't need to carry this shame with me forever. I opened my eyes and saw these little yellow lights around me, and I felt light, and I felt like liberated from this weight. Damn it, Carol, you were right. Thank you.
All right. So our third storyteller is Sherry Rosen. I just want to say thank you for Sherry for putting this together. I forgot to thank you at the beginning, but come on up.
Hi, everybody. I can't see you, but I can feel you. You know what? This summer, I saw the Barbie movie. Oy. When I live in Harlem, when I came out of the theater in Harlem, I just stood by the theater, and all of a sudden it hit me. My goodness. I was raised as a little girl to be a big, beautiful Barbie doll. Let me explain that. I was told that a man was more important than a woman, and I was told if I was with a man, never to show how smart I am. I was told I was only there to please. I was only there to be pretty. And I wanted to go to drama school desperately. And my parents said no. And I had no power. I had no credit cards. I had no checking account. I had no banking account. I had no anything, nothing in my name. There was no power at all. I was told the only reason I was here was to be pretty and to be a people pleaser. And I really took that to heart. Man, I was the best people pleaser you could have ever imagined. So that movie really hit me. And then at this night, so living in this repressed New England and repressed family, and I grew up in Lynn, Massachusetts. Then my love, Michael, we were 21. In that repression, we got married and we moved to New York City. So the first year, it was great because we were both so shocked by New York City, such a huge change. So we were really supporting each other. And then I began to see, as the years went on, that our value system was like this. He didn't think anything about lying and cheating. The best part about our marriage was our 2 sons. So finally, after about 8 years, I said to Michael, look, let's go into therapy. Our marriage sucks. Let's do something about it. So you know what he said? No. He said, let's all live under one roof. You go your way, I go my way, and I said, no way. And I don't think that Michael really believed I was going to leave. I told him, I said, I'm leaving. I don't know how long it's going to take me, but I'm leaving you. It actually took me 2 years. So the first thing I knew, I had to go into therapy myself. So I got myself a really supportive therapist. So she said to me, Sherry, do me a favor. Get stuff in your name. Credit cards, banking accounts, saving account. Get something in your name. And then get a part-time job, because I had been a stay-at-home mom for 6 years. So I did what she told me. And also what I started to notice is I always tried to emulate my conservative mom and sister, trying to dress like them, trying to be like them. I didn't know who I was, except I was supposed to be like them, like the Barbie. And so I started to notice the chains started to get a little looser. And I started changing my way of dressing. And I started wearing these gypsy dresses and gypsy blouses and wearing lots of jewelry and big earrings. And then I changed my hair from brown to red. And I looked in the mirror one day and I went, whoa, hey, you look really good. So I was beginning to find myself. And so then the therapist says to me, okay, Sherry, now I want you, before you leave Michael, I want you to be with other people. Oy. So I went from no sex to sex all the time. It was like I was in an ice cream shop. Vanilla, chocolate, pistachio. I had to try everything. And then we slept on the floor. I had to try it in the ocean, in the forest. We were on a table, occasionally on the bed. I was having the time of my life. And then, all of a sudden, the Jewish guilt came up. And the New England guilt came up. I was doing something wrong. I must be a sex addict. I'm having such a good time. I wasn't used to having a good time. So I decide to go to Sex Addicts Anonymous at 34th Street, not too far from here. And it was at St. Stephen's Church. So I go in there and I see lots of men and a few women sitting in a circle, and I kind of slide in. One guy gets up and says, I just got out of prison and I do really violent things to women, and I know I have to change. Boy. And then another one gets up and says, I do bad things to women. I know I have to change. And I say, I know I have to get the F out of here. So at break, I ran out of there so fast. I ran to the subway and I ran to my safe space. And what I realized is I was having the time of my life, and I was breaking those chains of being this big, beautiful Barbie and trying to find and finding the genuine, the smart, the wonderful Sherry Rosen.
Powerful, terrific story, Sherry. Thank you. So our next storyteller is Mark Winston, and so come on up.
Sorry, I'm loud. When I was growing up, we always had a lot of pets, mostly cats and dogs in my family. Now, my parents took dogs very, very seriously. They loved golden retrievers, so it had to be that right breed. They researched, they found a breeder they liked, and went and met the puppies and picked one, and we brought home a puppy, and then a couple of years later got another, and then later on there was another. But there was a lot of thought put into getting these dogs. Cats were different. There was always the feeling in my family that a cat is a cat is a cat. There was no recognition that there are different breeds. There was no recognition that cats are individuals and have individual personalities. Cats were cats. And we got our cats the way a lot of people get their cats. Either you go to a shelter or you take in a stray. And don't get me wrong, I like the feeling of saving an animal that would otherwise have a horrible life. But the problem with having, with having, well, let's say a cat of an unknown provenance is that sometimes they can be psychologically damaged, and that can cause grief in the family, and we experienced that growing up. Nevertheless, when I was single, living alone, and wanted a pet, and I realized that my life was not built for having a dog, I went for a cat, and I went with what I knew. I went to North Shore Animal League, brought home 2 kittens, Speck, which I named Speck and Bungie. They were very cute, don't get me wrong. Bungie was kind of smallish, white and black. Speck was bigger, fatter, gray and white, with a little speck on his nose, which is how I gave him that name. But they were emotionally damaged. Bungie, for her part, had what I'll call separation anxiety. I sat down, she had to be on my lap. I'd brush her off, she would jump right back on. And anytime I tried to sit for anything, to watch TV, to work on my computer, to talk on the phone, to eat anything, she had to be on my lap, and it was a struggle. Speck wasn't as affectionate. His problem was that he didn't like using the litter box. I had a litter box out for the cats. Speck would go right next to the litter box. So I moved the litter box to where he had gone, and he would go next to the litter box. And this created a problem given that I was in a one-bedroom apartment with wall-to-wall carpeting. But I lived with it because, you adopt an animal, you deal with it, you live with it, you deal with their foibles. And those were the pets I had when I met Blair, who I would eventually marry. Blair had grown up without pets. So she really didn't know about living with animals. But she also wanted to get along with them. As soon as, whenever she was over at the apartment, she made a point of feeding the cats to get them to like her. Bungie, of course, hissed at her. And Speck kind of ignored her, which honestly was preferable, but at least none of the cats ever puked in her shoes. So we had that going for her. And that was what happened that was the situation when we got married. It was the four of us, Blair and me and Speck and Bungie. And Speck was just kind of living his own life, and Bungie loved me, loved being on my lap, and had her own little private Cold War with Blair. A couple of years after we'd moved, shortly after we moved into a house, Speck ran away. That left the three of us. Actually, by that point, it was the four of us because we had a baby. A few years later, Bungie passed away, which was, it was hard for me because that was kind of, Speck and Bungie had been my single life animals, and now I was without them. And part of me wanted another pet, but I really didn't. After the experience of Speck ruining floors and ruining carpets, and Bungie always wanting to be on my lap and hissing at my wife all the time, I didn't want another pet. But at this point, the kids did. They wanted another cat. And I said no. And Blair said, well, why don't you get a red Maine Coon male? I'm like, red Maine Coon male? Well, she pointed out that Maine Coons were a particular breed of cat that were known to be very friendly. She had a friend who was a biologist who had this theory that the gene for red fur was related to the gene for docility. And further, she had done research and knew that in cats, males are more docile, more dopey than the females. So get a red Maine Coon. No, I don't want a cat. And the kids wanted cats, but I didn't. And Blair wanted us to get a red Maine Coon. And so what happened was, over the years, we actually tried having cats, not because I wanted them, but cats would come into our lives. There was the time that neighbors brought over a box full of kittens. They explained that the mother had given birth in their garage and run off. These kittens were too young to be separated from their mother, but they needed a home, and if we didn't take them in, well, the neighbors made it clear they would kill the kittens if we didn't take them in. So we took them in. And what followed was one of the most horrible nights of my life. As I said, these kittens were too young to be separated from their mother. My older son, actually at the time my only son, had taken to one of them. He had named it Lena, and he tried feeding it from an eyedropper, and we had all these others that we tried feeding from an eyedropper, but they weren't ready. They were new. They were really, really young, and over that night, one at a time, the cats passed away. The kittens passed away. The last one was Lena, who left my son heartbroken. So the kids wanted another cat, and I said no. And Blair said we should get a red Maine Coon. And a couple years later, for another example, there was this beautiful black and white kitten that my son Ethan wanted, and he brought it in, and against my better judgment, I agreed, and he named it Rothgar, and we made an appointment for the vet to get Rothgar checked out. And a few days later, the night before Rothgar's appointment, my wife and kids came home and found Rothgar dead in the bathroom.
Oh my God.
So the kids wanted another cat, and I said no. Oh, but get a red Maine Coon. And this went on. There were other examples, but those are highlights, and you get the point. Until one day, Blair showed me an ad on Craigslist. Somebody was getting rid of a used cat. And it was a red Maine Coon named Morgan. And I really didn't want it, but against my better judgment, I got in the car and we drove up to, it was somewhere in upper Westchester County. And we met Morgan. Morgan was about 10 years old. He had spent most of his life as the lap cat of an old woman who passed away. This old woman's last words to her husband were, "Take care of Morgan." And he tried. But he was an old man. He really didn't have it in him to take care of a cat. So he gave Morgan to a vet who tried to rehome him, and in fact did rehome him, but it didn't work, and then he rehomed him again. And the people we were seeing were Morgan's home at the time, but they were going to go across country, and for some reason I never found out, they decided they couldn't take him with them, so could we take Morgan in? And we did. Against my better judgment, I will admit, but we took Morgan in. And the experience of Morgan was, it was literally an eye-opener. Morgan was sweet. He was affectionate. He never caused us any trouble. He always liked to hang out in the room with us. He'd be on the sofa, he'd jump up next to you, not on your lap, mind you, but next to you. He'd let you pick him up if you wanted, but he didn't force himself on you. When sometimes at night, if Morgan decided it was bedtime, he would kind of come into the office, meow at us and herd us to the bedroom. Morgan was wonderful. I loved that cat. There was always kind of a melancholy quality to him, which kind of makes sense because he had spent most of his life with this old woman who was gone. But we had Morgan for only a couple of years before he succumbed to old age, and we had to have him put to sleep. But it changed my attitude. Morgan, I had learned that it's not true that a cat is a cat is a cat. And since then, we have had several Maine Coon cats. We also have a British short hair now, and we've had a couple of mixed British short hair and Maine Coons. But they come from breeders who we met and we trust and we know, and we haven't had trouble with them. I'd be lying if I said we haven't tried the old-fashioned route of taking in a stray, because there have been a couple of times that my daughter has become enamored of a particularly beautiful stray in the neighborhood. And some neighborhood kids have brought over kittens that need to be taken care of. And we've tried. None of those has actually worked. But we've tried. And we have our, we have our long-term pets who are wonderful with us. And I have Morgan to thank for that, because Morgan opened my eyes to the fact that there are differences, and cats aren't just all interchangeable psychotic blobs. And I like to think that we also gave back to Morgan, because even though he never fully bonded with us the way he would have if he were a kitten, the fact is we gave him a comfortable place to live out his final years and to make peace with his life and his death. Thank you.
So our last storyteller is Anthony Renda, but before we call him up, just want to let you know there'll be a very brief Q&A after this. We have until 7, so we may have some extra time. So Anthony, why don't you come up?
Let's hear it for the previous storytellers. They were awesome, unbelievable. Great job, all of you. All inspiring. Sherry Rosen for organizing this. She put so much work and effort. All right. Give you a little background. I've been storytelling for a few years. I would say about 4 years pre-COVID. And each story I tell, whether it's here or any location, it has a purpose, has a meaning. And it makes me grow in some way, in some aspect. And Sherry says, "Oh, wow, it's new beginnings." I was like, wow. that's hitting me perfect. It's hitting, you know, a chord, especially this juncture in my life, in this chapter, right? I'm middle-aged, I'm in my 40s, and it's different when you're in your 40s, and you analyze things. You look back at your life and like, why I'm not married with 3 kids and a white picket fence in Long Island like my brother and sister. They are. All right? So, and, you know, we self-analyze, you know, and Socrates says, know thyself, you know. Why am I like this? Why am I here? All right, give you a little background. You know, we all have stories, you know, whether in our 20s or in our 30s, and as we get older, that's all we have. You know, if you were a former athlete, if you were an Army veteran, you can't go fighting in the battlefield or play football anymore, so you tell a story, yeah, I used to play with Joe Namath, yeah, you know, Jets. That's what you have when you get older. You have your stories, and you always have them. You also have them when you're young. And we all have stories that we tell our friends, our co-workers, and people we come in contact. In the country, you start a new job, and you have some stories that I've heard in the past, like, yeah, I'm a middle child of an Irish Catholic family. You know, we were raised up in Poughkeepsie. Or some stories like, I was raised by a single parent. So my mother was both the mother and father. So I never had siblings. So I had trouble getting along with people. And I have my story, which I've been telling for years, guys, decades, a couple decades, like over 15 years, and I realize something wrong with it, okay? And here's my story. I grew up in an Italian household, Sicilian, traditional family, came from Sicily over 50 years ago. I was the youngest of 3, traditional parents, you know. My father came here, we'd always tell a story. I came here with $50 in my pocket. And he opened up and he established and was very successful in opening up 2 businesses. All right, so he taught us work ethic, and I would say that. And since being the youngest, you know, we know the youngest child is always the rebel, right? The one who defies, who's defiant, right? He doesn't take the role of the mother and father being like, you know, working a union job like my father always wanted. He wanted to be more creative, play sports, you know, do comedy or storytelling, right? And usually the youngest child is, you know, mother's boy. And I was always close to my mom. Everywhere she went, I was by her hip, you know, where's mom? And she would leave me at school, you know, and some of you can relate to this. I would cry. She left me. I was 9th grade. Now I was 1st grade. Then I would say, you know, I have ADHD, but in my days, we weren't diagnosed. We self-diagnosed ourselves. You know, nowadays, they have a big folder. It's called an IEP, Individual Education Plan. You know, you're given Ritalin, you had specialized teachers and instructors, and I self-diagnosed myself because I would realize something's different with me. When I was in school, I didn't get the information. And having ADHD, it comes with all its symptoms, the HPAW, hyper. You know, I was always quick with my actions, you know. That guy Anthony's a little weird. And overthinking, you know, because your mind is going, you know, like 1,000 revolutions at once. And ADHD, you have a learning deficiency when it comes to, like, I remember when I was in college, I'm like, the professor would talk for 2 hours, I'm like, what the fuck did he just say? I have no idea. And you used to record it. Like my memory lapses with facts, information, details. Microphone, don't fall on me. Okay, and then I would say, being a Gemini, I would tell people, I'm a Gemini too, ADHD, Gemini. I have many sides. I have this good side, it's nice and virtuous. And I have this arrogant side that's mean. When you walk in front of him, he wants to trip you. Okay? He wants to beat everybody. All right, and then I would tell these stories to my co-workers when I was teaching as a veteran teacher. And now I work in a corporation. I would tell my coworkers, you know, on off time, yeah, I'm the youngest of 3, you know, Italian family, migrated from Sicily, you know, ADHD, you know, I'm crazy, you know, I forget things, my learning deficiency, you know, young, you know, being a Gemini, many sides. And I said to myself, something's wrong. And I caught myself, this was a couple years ago, I was saying to myself, because I was putting labels on myself. And I was acting in these ways, like a person with ADHD, hyper, weird, overthinking, you know, being paranoid at times, you know, forgetting people's names, forgetting, you know, my boss gets in my case, like, oh, you forgot your time clock, you know, and I would call clients and people I work with, I was like, what the hell's that person's name again? And I would just not retain information. Then Gemini, during the day, I have many moods. Like, I'll be like a chipper, in mid-afternoon, I'm mellow, right? And I would get these sides of being the youngest, being a mama's boy, being defiant, being the rebel. So I said these labels I put on myself because I would write in my journal and say, why am I like this? And I'll put these labels on myself. But when you put labels, it limits you. And it makes you play certain roles of responsibility, and gives you certain attributes and actions. So now I say, these are not my crutches no more. They're my superpowers. I do have ADHD, but it's under control. I know how not to be hyper by slowing down, being more melancholy, like a wave, like an ocean, slowing down my thoughts, not overthinking. It does affect my memory, but not as much as it did when I was younger in high school and college. It makes me want to do more things and retain more and be more elaborate and explore more. All right, being a Gemini, I don't say it's two-faced and two sides. I think it's multifaceted. You have many sides, many personalities. You have an artistic, you have a physical sports side, you have an introspect side. And being the youngest of three, you don't have to be the defiant one or the rebel. I can follow my father's footsteps, being traditional, because I like my traditional values. People say you're stubborn. No, it's not. It's not that I'm stubborn, it's I believe in my values and my principles of family first, and being kind and giving. So no more I set labels. Now I set limitless. Don't set labels on yourself, because it limits you and who you are as a person and your actions. And I realized this in my career, in my relationships with my family. So now I am in charge of my labels, and I'm in charge of all the qualities and attributes that each possess. Thank you very much for listening to that.
Let's give it a hand for everybody. Thank you so much. We all come up to take a bow. I want to thank our great lighting and sound technicians and house managers and everyone else who helped us. We have about 15 minutes. Come on up, everyone. If you want to ask questions of us or not. And I think Sherry wanted to say a few words. I don't know. But anyone want to ask any questions to us? And or we could. All right. Thank you so much. Did you want to say anything?
No, I just wanted to know if the best part of this is getting questions from the audience. Not to put you on the spot or anything, but
Are you guys a class, or how did you meet and find storytelling as a hobby?
Well, we were in different classes for a guy named Adam Wade, but then we decided to do this on
He's
our own.
not just a guy named Adam.
All right.
He is a storyteller
He's an
supreme.
icon.
Sorry, he's gonna kill me. Let's edit that out. He's a storyteller supreme, right? And he's amazing. And I think we should name our group the Adam Wade Acolytes. Is that better?
Much.
And
Thank
he
you.
teaches here at the Magnet, so
Yes,
anyone
so-
interested in storytelling classes.
It's fantastic. I really recommend it. Yeah.
So how do you
Anybody
prepare
else?
a story when you wanna, how do you decide how to begin and end this? I mean, obviously you wanted to talk about going to Sex Addicts Anonymous. So how do you decide, I'm gonna start the story from all the way back, or, as opposed to just, I decided to go to Sex Addicts Anonymous.
well, it's funny. When I talk to a friend, it's very different than storytelling. With a friend, it's just we're hanging out. But with storytelling in front of an audience, you could bore the hell out of them with telling them I went to a sex addict meeting. There's got to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's got to be something that is compelling me in the story and that you want to listen to it. And there's also got to be descriptions. And of these stories that all of us are telling, they're all true stories from our life. And for me personally, creating these stories gives me a chance to connect with the audience, because from my personal experience, in most families, including my own, nobody talks. My mama, my papa, my grandpa, my aunties, uncles, I wanted to hear stories from them. Nobody spoke. And I find even in families today, nobody shares stories. But that's what compelled me to first come and start studying with Adam to share these stories. It's kind of a legacy that I can leave my family, and it's a way for me to communicate with you guys, because I'm sure if we're doing our stories right and skillfully enough, you guys can connect with something in the stories that you may say, oh my God, I went through the same thing, or I don't feel so alone. You know, when I hear somebody, there's a connection. If we're doing our job right, we can make a connection with the audience. I went on a little bit,
Yeah,
but I get
so
very
you-
passionate.
For storytelling, it all depends on the prompt or the topic. Like some examples, like a memorable moment or a mentor. Like this was New Beginnings. Like I don't start writing, you know, like as I'm brushing my teeth, taking a shower, New Beginnings, okay, what can I relate to it? And it should be like, when you think about it, that process, that mental process, like 2 or 3 things that stand out. Like if you think about like a memorable experience for you that changed your life, car accident, getting married, divorce, like, and you think about, I'll think about this 2 or 3 experiences, okay, which one was the most impactful, most important one that made me transform? Because when the story is a climax, and at the end is a transformation where it changed you in a way. So I think about it like, you know, for like 2 or 3 days, and I narrow it down. And then I'll write a rough draft little by little, the beginning, how I want to start it, the body, with all the facts, and the transformation at the end. I know everyone has a different process too.
I have a question up there.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. My name is Viviana Duncan, and I know Sherry. She has performed at my open mic. I enjoyed it tremendously, and especially the cat. I'm a cat lady. That really hit home. I run an open mic for a very long time, well known. It's called Stark Reality at 353 Studios, and I would love to feature you. You know, each one of you. I mean, there's no such thing as who's better. It's amazing. Each one of you comes from a different perspective, and you tackle different subjects. And I have flyers for you.
Oh, wow.
For my
I would
next,
appreciate it.
Awesome.
my next show is next Saturday. I'm
All
sorry,
right.
next
She's
Friday.
great, she's
Next-
great.
All right.
Next Friday night, Sherry can vouch for me. She has performed there. And
Perfect.
she
You know,
has.
she doesn't have to vouch. We believe you.
We feel it.
I just want to say thank you so much. I don't want to interrupt you. No, I just,
That's it. I'd love to give you flyers after
Yes,
the program.
excellent. Well, that's one thing I really like about the themes and all that is that, as you said, you're right. You know, we come at it different ways. You know, maybe someone's more comedic, someone's sadder, someone's quirky, somebody's, you know, it doesn't have to be one thing, and that's what I like about the storytelling. It doesn't have to be comedic. It doesn't have to be sad. Like the moth, you know, someone said that they do the moth, or I've seen on a message board on Facebook or something, and the guy's like, I only know sad stories, and I don't know any how to tell a comedic story, which is, to me, it's limiting. You try your best, and what I do is I'll speak it out first. I record it on my phone. I moved out to the suburbs, and I drive, and I talk to myself and record myself on the phone. And then I listen to it, and I hate it, and then I write stuff.
Also, one of the teachers, I don't know if you know Jude Trader-Wolf.
Yes.
She's an improviser, storyteller. She's been around for years. And she had this thing on LinkedIn where she said, for 10 minutes every day, write something funny that's happened to you. And all of a sudden, this macabre sense of humor started coming out from me because I started doing that, and things that I would take for granted that I wouldn't think were funny, all of a sudden started to be funny. And I thought, you know what? Maybe in some way, if I keep doing this exercise, I can bring out this dark side of humor in my storytelling and experiment with it and see what happens. Because I had a small incident where I was at this retirement home booking a gig for myself on 86th Street, and I come out and there's this CBS TV videographer, and he's shooting across the street this brownstone. And me, with the curiosity, I say to him, "What's up?" And he says to me, "Suicide and murder." And I'm going, "Holy Toledo." But I wrote this as one of the funny things that happened to me, because here I came out of a retirement home where these people are constantly living with life and death. I come out with my curiosity, oh, I gotta know everything, and he tells me there's murder suicide across the street, and I'm going, oh my God, why did I even ask? But I know somewhere, if I start working on this, that I can create new kind of stories with this macabre kind of sense of humor that has come up within me that I never would have known if I hadn't have tried this exercise. And I don't know why I keep on talking. I guess
You're the whole part of it.
You're the
Thank you.
moderator.
All right, thank you for organizing. We have a few more minutes. Any other questions or any last thoughts? All right, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And have a nice night, everyone.
more.
Encore.
I can tap dance.